Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today. My name is Jeff Sirkin. I'm the founder and CEO of Sirkin Research, and we're continuing our webinar series around Martech as a strategic enabler. And my guest in this series is Matt Malanga, Chief Marketing Officer of NewsCred.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm looking forward to going through this next set of insights, and I appreciate everyone taking a little time from your lunch break or morning to join us today.
Great. And quick logistical note, there's a Q&A. So as we go through the slides at the bottom of your Zoom, feel free to type them in the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can at the end, as many as we have time for. So as Matt mentioned, this all started from a survey that we sent out to about 450 or so marketing leaders across enterprise organizations. And I'll be going through this series and sharing insights from the research. And Matt has great perspective as an experienced CMO, and I'd love to get his take on these topics.
Yeah, so Jeff will summarize what we covered in chapter 1 and 2 and the upcoming slides. Today's going to be focused on the introduction of marketing orchestration. I think you'll find the data insights are really compelling. Certainly how leaders think about what they need to be successful. And I'll let Jeff take it from here.
Great. And one other quick note, that this whole series is being recorded. So NewsCred will be sending out the links to those that attended. So again, thanks for those of you who are back from the last couple of weeks, and welcome to all the new attendees. In order to set the stage for today's conversation, we want to do a quick summary of what we've covered so far. And first and foremost, just to give a sense of how vast this space is, there's just so many tools in the market. And there's over 8,000 tools in Martech today. And because of that, the modern marketer is using more than 5 every single day. And one of the other important pieces was that only 26% of marketing leaders say their Martech is a strategic enabler today. And the theme that we're finding is that it meets the tactical needs, but not something that's necessarily creating competitive advantage. And last week's topic was all around categorization. And there's an innate human need to associate things in logical groups. But at the same time, especially when it comes to Martech, there's drawbacks. The lines around these are drawn around functionality. And to be perfectly honest, they're somewhat arbitrary and they're shifting, as we'll see today and in the coming and next week as well. So the first question of our survey was actually what the main goal is of marketing in your organization. And 78% of the respondents said that their primary focus was driving growth through ROI versus 22% that said they were focused on operational efficiency and cost savings. And now, interestingly, we looked at this across all different company sizes, and that ratio was pretty consistent. Matt, just off the top, is this something that's surprising to you?
I'm surprising that driving growth through ROI is not even higher, to be honest. I don't think marketing's primary objective is to be around operational efficiency. I think that's an underpinning requirement of marketing to do more with less. I think ultimately the charter of marketing in most organizations is help drive top line growth. So yeah, the one shock I have is not higher.
Right. That makes sense. And again, so as we saw this, and we've interviewed marketing leaders over the last few months, including the former CMO of MasterCard and others. And when we look at those that are successful at driving ROI in marketing, there are consistent themes that keep appearing. And they roll up to what we're calling marketing orchestration. And we'll get to those themes in a second on the next slide. But what I wanted to cover first is, why is orchestration relevant? And in reality, that orchestration enables you to do 3 things. Enables you to be more agile, to get campaigns out the door faster and beat today that the average is about 12 weeks that it's taking marketers to push campaigns out. And some of the ones at the top are just doing so much better. To be able to demonstrate that impact on revenue, that right here again, as we're saying, marketers are being tasked with driving ROI. How are you showing that? How are you proving that? And to be able to achieve more with less, just frankly, to let your technology be a strategic enabler, to get rid of some of the work about work that we've touched on in previous surveys as well. So let's dive into those themes. And so these are, again, what we're calling the key themes of orchestration. The first one to touch on here is data. that in order to accomplish ROI, you really need visibility into what's working. And then beyond that, just to be able to prove ROI through reporting. And Matt touched on this a couple weeks ago, but his strategy as a CMO is aligning immediately with finance on how to best measure that, make sure there's a consistent strategy across the organization. And then just in other survey work, analytics has shown up time and time again. It showed up as both the #1 initiative and #1 challenge for marketers as we look going into 2021. So certainly an important one. The next up is teams. The orchestration needs to occur across the resource stack of marketing. And when we say that, we mean both people and money. When we talk about both channels and content, of course, content is still king. And around the channels as well, it's all about accelerating the execution of campaigns and getting that speed to market. And then the final one on here is around integrations. And when we say that, it's not just your technology and your systems, but it's also having the integrated and omni-channel campaigns. And as we touched on, with marketers using more than 5 tools a day, it's so important to streamline across those systems, excuse me. And we'll come back to this one in a minute. But Matt, let me just sort of pause here and get your thoughts on these.
Yeah, so I mean, I listened to those focus groups as well. I mean, these themes seem to be the themes that came out time and time again. Largely, we were talking to what Scott Brinker refers to as the maestro function. These are leaders who are chartered with making sure there's coordination and collaboration across teams and people. And as we had focus groups, yeah, these were consistently the themes and the challenges that came up. Where collectively these things had to work in tandem in order for marketing to achieve, agility and be able to get campaigns out the door fast. The ability to effectively measure ROI, and of course the ability to do more with less, develop operational efficiency.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the important point is that the truth, these are all interdependent and connected, right? And in order to really achieve orchestration, you really need to master all of these. And so as we've seen these themes develop over time, we wanted to see how well our survey audience was doing against these. So we asked how successful they are across their organizations today at each of these. And, before we get there, one other thing we actually looked at was around how important relatively are each of these themes to the overall view on Martech. And as I mentioned, integrations was #1. And that one for sure, it again speaks to the fact that if you don't have your systems together, if you don't have a single view of what's going on across your organization, your Martech just feels like it's adding more work. It's just adding more work about work, and you really can't integrate and execute seamlessly. And then data, obviously, as we had mentioned, #2. But those two, to me, are really the two that stand sort of head and shoulders above the rest.
Now, Jeff, I would assume this is in terms of like where their biggest challenges are today or where they're most successful today.
Yes, exactly. So this was essentially around what their biggest challenges are to achieving all 5 of these, as well as how it impacted their view on Martech as a strategic enabler.
Got it. Yeah. So I think what we're saying then is all these things are important in order to achieve orchestration, be able to achieve those things that we want to achieve, which is, get campaigns out the door, impact results, and be efficient at doing it. I think what you're suggesting is that integration and data are probably the two where companies are struggling the most today.
That's right. Those are the biggest unmet needs that are holding them back from being able to orchestrate efficiently.
That makes sense.
Yep. And so again, as I mentioned, we asked across each of these 5 themes, we asked our survey audience how successful they were across their organizations. And only 8% of marketing leaders said that they're doing each of those 5 things either well or very well today. And that 8% is what we would define as having achieved orchestration. Matt, just off the bat, is that surprising to you?
Given the survey results, I'm not overly surprised.
Mm-hmm.
You also got to take into consideration these are large enterprises,
right?
So being able to achieve orchestration across a large organization of say 25 employees or more has to be challenging. And if you think of all the facts around how many systems they use, how many unique functions there are, um, no, I'm not entirely shocked by that number.
Yeah, and again, to your point, we've seen in previous work that only about 30% of organizations can demonstrate ROI. So, right off the bat, it would have been hard to see a number that was much higher than this. And so while there is only a small handful of organizations who have achieved orchestration today, we did see something very interesting about those that have. And so when we look at those that have and that are doing all of these well today, 33% of them feel strongly that their MarTech is a strategic enabler today, as opposed to 25% for those that haven't achieved all of these. And even more so as you look into the future, where 67% of those that have achieved orchestration are saying they feel that by 2025, their MarTech will be a strategic enabler, as compared to 46% of those that hadn't gotten there yet. And this group, again, while it's small, they've reached the mountaintop, and MarTech helped them get there. And again, as I mentioned, the biggest impact was the theme of interoperability and integrations. So, Matt, any sort of parting thoughts on this piece?
Yeah, so I'm going to put my read into this, and this
Mm-hmm.
may be a stretch, but it looks like there may be a correlation here, which is of those companies that were able to accomplish five things well or very well, there's five themes
Mm-hmm.
around data and integrations and team collaboration and channel execution, and of course, content and creation of content well. It seems like those are fairly well correlated to not only defining MarTech is strategic today, but they're very bullish compared to the entire population on where MarTech will be, 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the truth is, again, while we're saying this is a small group, only 8% today, to me, this really should be the aspirational target for the other 92%. So to summarize, what we're talking about, again, 78% of those marketing leaders are being tasked with driving growth through ROI. We covered the five key themes that make up marketing orchestration. And again, there is only that small handful that have achieved successful orchestration, but those that have reached that promised land were really driven by MarTech, and especially around those data and integrations. So that
Yeah,
covers our content. Let me see do we have any questions? Or Matt, anything else you wanted to add?
no, I think that's a nice way of laying out the importance of orchestration, like the how and the why, in order to make MarTech strategic.
Yep. So let me see. I know we're already at time, but if there's any final questions, if you guys want to put them in the Q&A, we can see if we can get to one or two. Okay. Well, if not, then thank you so much again for taking some time out of your day with us. And please join us again next week as we conclude the series and talk about the end of MarTech categories as we know them. Thanks everybody for joining.
Take care. Bye.